The first thing you need to understand about the galactic hegemony is that we don't make mistakes, not significant ones anyway. In our 12,000 cycles of interstellar dominance, we've catalogued, studied, and when necessary subjugated over 800 sentient species. We have a process. It's methodical. It works. Or it did, until we met humans. My name is Vrill'Zax Morden Cat, Senior Xenoanthropologist for the Hegemony's First Contact Division. That's a fancy way of saying I'm the poor bastard they send in to figure out how to properly terrify new species into submission. It's not as awful as it sounds. Most emerging spacefaring races are appropriately awed. When our dreadnoughts materialize in their orbital paths, standard protocols show up. Look menacing, explain the rules of joining our happy galactic family, which mostly involve paying tribute and staying out of our way, and be on our merry path to the next target. 98% compliance rate. The remaining 2% required adjustments to their social structures. That's the official terminology. So when Command intercepted signals from Sol 3, a run-of-the-mill terrestrial planet circling an utterly forgettable G-type main sequence star, I expected the usual frightened diplomats, hasty capitulation, perhaps some token resistance if they were particularly spirited. What I did not expect was Captain Jason fucking Tucker. But I'm getting ahead of myself. System is unremarkable. Second observer Katiklik clicked through her mandibles as our dreadnought, the inevitable dominance, dropped out of slip space, just beyond the orbit of Sol 4, what the humans call Mars, single habitable planet, moderate population, primitive FTL experimentation, no significant colonial presence beyond their moon and a small scientific outpost on the fourth planet. Admiral Vrill'Zax, his 8 eye stalks sweeping over the tactical display, gave the equivalent of our species' shrug, a rippling of his dorsal membranes that signaled mild contempt. Another easy one, he rumbled. Morden Cat, prepare the standard first contact package, threat assessment. I scanned the preliminary data. Their military technology is peculiar. They seem to prioritize individual firepower over synchronized swarm tactics. No hive intelligence detected. Their spacecraft are bulky, inefficient, and largely unshielded. But I paused, puzzled by an anomaly in the biological scans. What is it? Vrill'Zax demanded. They spend a third of their lives unconscious. The bridge fell silent. Even Kitlik stopped her incessant mandible clicking. Unconscious? The Admiral's membranes flushed dark orange, a sign of disbelief, voluntarily. They call it sleep, I explained, still reading through the data. Apparently their neural networks require regular shutdown and defragmentation. They become completely vulnerable for approximately 8 standard hours per 24-hour cycle. Vrill'Zax made a sound that our translator couldn't properly convert, something between a laugh and a wheeze. A species that renders itself defenseless for a third of its existence managed to achieve spaceflight. The universe continues to amaze. Easy pickings. Kit-tick-lack clicked. We could time our demands to coincide with their mass unconsciousness period. I frowned, which for my species involves a complex reconfiguration of facial ridges. There's something else. Despite this apparent vulnerability, they've survived multiple extinction-level events. Their historical records show remarkable resilience. Irrelevant. Vrill'Zax dismissed with a flick of his primary tendrils. Prepare the standard approach. They'll understand their place soon enough. And that, dear readers of the Galactic Historical Archive, is where we made our first mistake. Our arrival in Earth orbit followed protocol perfectly. We positioned the inevitable dominance directly above their largest population center, a sprawling coastal metropolis they called New York, and broadcast the standard hegemony greeting, a carefully calibrated message designed to inspire a perfect balance of awe and terror. We expected panicked communications, perhaps emergency meetings of their governing bodies, the usual frantic diplomatic scrambling. What we got was a single transmission from a vessel that had departed from their international orbital platform almost immediately after our arrival. A tiny, unarmed craft no larger than our dreadnought's primary waste disposal unit. "This is Captain Jason Tucker of the United Earth Space Force vessel Fearless," came the transmission. A single human appeared on our view screen, pink-skinned with facial hair around the mouth region, a decoration or symbiotic organism. We weren't immediately sure. "I've been authorized to welcome you to Earth space and inquire about your intentions." Admiral Vrill'Zax performed the ritual gesture of impending domination, extending his threat tendrils to full display. The effect on most species was immediate physical submission. Captain Tucker scratched his nose. "Nice tentacles," he said. "Very dramatic." The bridge crew exchanged confused glances. I hurriedly consulted my xenopsychology database for appropriate responses. Vrill'Zax recovered first. "We are the hegemony, the supreme power in this galactic sector. Your world now falls under our protection. Compliance with our directives will ensure a mutually beneficial relationship." Said Tucker, taking a sip from a container. My scanners indicated it contained a mild stimulant mixed with heated plant extract. "And if we're not interested in your protection?" Vrill'Zax's membranes darkened, a sign of irritation. He wasn't used to being questioned. "Non-compliance is not an option. We have cataloged and integrated 800 species into our dominion. Resistance has historically proven unfortunate." Tucker nodded, looking entirely unimpressed. "Right. Well, here's the thing. I've been authorized to invite one of your representatives to Earth to discuss this further. We figure if you wanted to vaporize us, you'd have done it already. So maybe we can talk like adults." I nearly choked on my respiratory fluid. No species had ever responded to first contact with such casual disregard for protocol. Vrill'Zax was equally stunned. "You invite us? The protocol is that we summon your leaders." Tucker shrugged. "Yeah, well, that doesn't work for us. Our leaders are kind of busy. Tuesday is fine, though. We're having lasagna in the cafeteria. It's pretty good." I watched in fascination as the human continued to sip his beverage, seemingly unconcerned that he was addressing a warship capable of reducing his entire planet to molten slag. Either their species possessed unparalleled courage, or they were cognitively incapable of properly assessing threats. Given their sleep vulnerability, I strongly suspected the latter. After much deliberation, the Admiral reluctantly agreed to send me as the hegemony representative. It was unprecedented, but Vrill'Zax was intrigued enough by this unusual response to bend protocol. "Study them," he instructed as I prepared to board the diplomatic shuttle. "Identify their weaknesses beyond this sleep phenomenon. Find out why they're so irrationally fearless." 20 standard hours later, I found myself in a structure the humans called the United Nations, seated across from a diverse collection of their species. Captain Tucker was there, along with representatives from their various territorial divisions. Their security personnel stood at the perimeter, carrying primitive projectile weapons that our scans indicated would be completely ineffective against my exoskeleton. The human designated as their Secretary General, a tall female with dark skin, opened the proceedings. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you, Ambassador Vrill'Zax. We are eager to establish peaceful relations with your hegemony." I performed the ceremonial posture of gracious superiority, extending my sensory frills to their full intimidating width. "The hegemony acknowledges your welcome. I must clarify that I am not an ambassador, but a xenoanthropologist. My purpose is to evaluate your species' potential place within our dominion." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. The Secretary General's expression remained neutral, but I detected a slight elevation in her cardiovascular rate. "I see," she said carefully. "And what exactly does inclusion in your dominion entail?" I outlined the standard terms: protection from the more aggressive powers in the sector, primarily the Vrex Combine and the Thalassian Communion, access to certain approved technologies, and in exchange, a modest resource tribute and acceptance of hegemony authority in interstellar matters. As I spoke, I noticed something odd. None of the humans appeared particularly intimidated. In fact, some were taking notes. Others were engaged in quiet side conversations. One was even consuming food, a behavior that on most worlds would be considered a grave insult during such proceedings. Ambassador, sorry, xenoanthropologist, the Secretary General said when I finished. While we appreciate your offer of protection, Earth has managed its affairs independently for some time. We would prefer a relationship of mutual respect rather than tributary status. I blinked, all four of my eyes in sequence, the hegemony expression of incredulity. Perhaps I've failed to make our position clear. The hegemony is not presenting an offer. We are informing you of the new galactic reality for your world. Captain Tucker, who had been unusually quiet, leaned forward. Yeah, about that. We looked into your hegemony while you were on your way down. Made a few calls. My cardiac sacs constricted. Calls? To whom? Oh, you know, Tucker said casually. Around. The Vrill'Zax Combine had some interesting things to say. And those Thalassians, chatty bunch. Once you get past all the bubbling, this was impossible. Humans had barely achieved rudimentary FTL capability. They couldn't possibly have established communications with other major powers. You're bluffing, I said, employing a human negotiation concept I'd studied during preparation. Maybe, Tucker shrugged. But here's something that's definitely not a bluff. We've unanimously declined your offer of protection. We're prepared to establish diplomatic relations as equals, but we don't do the tribute thing. Not our style. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. This was unprecedented in 12,000 cycles of hegemony expansion. No emerging species had ever flatly rejected our terms. This is most unwise, I said, my vocal sacs vibrating with warning tones. The hegemony does not take rejection well. The Secretary General smiled. It was not a submission display as I'd initially thought human facial expressions might be, but something else entirely. Neither do we, xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax. Neither do we.
I returned to the inevitable dominance, deeply disturbed. My report to Admiral Vorthax was met with predictable outrage.
They refused. A preeminent spacefaring civilization refused hegemony protection. His membranes flashed crimson with fury. Prepare the intimidation protocols. Target their moon base first. A demonstration. Sir, I ventured cautiously. I believe there's something unusual about these humans that warrants further study before military action. Their vulnerability is obvious. Kittiklak clicked dismissively. 1/3 of their population is unconscious at any given time. They're practically defenseless. And yet, I countered, they show no fear. It's not bravado. I've studied enough species to recognize false courage. They genuinely seem unconcerned by threats that would terrify most rational beings. The Admiral's eye stalks swiveled toward me. Explain. I believe it's connected to their sleep cycle. Most species evolved continuous consciousness as a survival mechanism, constant vigilance against predators and environmental threats. Humans instead adapted to periods of complete vulnerability by developing an unusual psychological trait. Which is, they don't give a fuck. The translator struggled with the human idiom, eventually rendering it as, they possess a remarkable capacity for calculated disregard of consequences when threat. Vorthax considered this. You believe this is a strength rather than a weakness. I believe it makes them unpredictable, I replied carefully, and potentially dangerous. A species that can routinely render itself unconscious and still survive must have developed extraordinary adaptations. The Admiral was silent for several moments, his decision tendrils writhing in thought. Finally, he spoke. We will proceed with intimidation protocols, but scaled back. Target their uninhabited satellite only. Let's see how they respond to a demonstration of power. Hours later, we fired a precisely calibrated energy pulse at Earth's moon, carving the hegemony symbol into its surface, visible to every human on the planet's night side. The response was immediate. Every military installation on Earth went to high alert. Primitive but numerous defense satellites reoriented toward our position, and exactly 6 minutes after our demonstration, we received a transmission. It wasn't from Captain Tucker or any government official. It was broadcast on all frequencies, originating from thousands of individual human communication devices simultaneously. A simple text message, translated into perfect hegemonic script. "We see you." And then, most disturbingly, their entire planet began to sing. At least, that's what our sensors initially reported. A harmonic resonance emanating from the surface. It took our analysts several minutes to realize what we were actually detecting. Millions of humans vocalizing in unison, producing a sound that our cultural database identified as an ancient Earth battle anthem. Even more bizarrely, many of these humans were those who should have been in their sleep cycle. They had apparently collectively decided to forego their biological necessity in order to participate in this demonstration. "Admiral," I said quietly as we listened to the eerie chorus rising from the planet below, "I believe we may have miscalculated." Vrill'Zax's membranes had paled to an ashen gray. For the first time in my service, I saw genuine uncertainty in his posture. Before he could respond, our tactical officer reported a new development. Thousands of small objects were launching from Earth's surface. "Missile," Vrill'Zax demanded. "Negative, Admiral. They appear to be personal spacecraft, civilian vessels. They're forming a perimeter around their planet." A human phrase I had encountered in my research suddenly made perfect sense. A line in the sand. As we watched in disbelief, the civilian fleet grew. A protective swarm of utterly inadequate vessels placing themselves between our dreadnought and their homeworld. It was simultaneously the most futile and most magnificent gesture of defiance I had ever witnessed. And then, cutting through the cacophony of the planetary chorus, came a familiar voice. "This is Captain Jason Tucker of the United Earth Space Force. That was a nice light show. Very pretty. Now it's our turn to demonstrate." A small object detached from the Fearless and accelerated toward us. Our defensive systems identified it as non-threatening. Some kind of probe or communication device. "Sir," our tactical officer reported with confusion, "the human vessel has launched a storage device. It contains data packets." "On screen," Vrill'Zax ordered. The data resolved into images, thousands of them, streaming across our displays. Historic battles, humans fighting against overwhelming odds, humans surviving catastrophes, humans enduring conditions that should have eradicated them, and most disturbingly, humans fighting each other with a ferocity that exceeded even the most aggressive species in our records. The final image lingered, a famous human military leader from their history, standing amid the ruins of a devastated city, making a simple hand gesture that our cultural database translated as victory, despite all costs. Captain Tucker's voice returned. "That's just a highlight reel. We've been practicing for this moment our entire history, fighting each other, because we didn't have anyone else to fight. We're not particularly interested in galactic war, but make no mistake, we will not be intimidated." "You are outmatched," Vrill'Zax responded, though I noted his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Maybe," Tucker acknowledged. "Probably. Even. But here's what you need to understand about humans, Admiral. We spend a third of our lives completely vulnerable, as your xenoanthropologists surely reported. And do you know why we can do that?" Vrill'Zax remained silent. "Because the rest of the time we're fucking unstoppable. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own stupidity. We're still here, and we protect what's ours." The transmission ended. The civilian fleet remained in position, a pitiful defense that would crumble in seconds if we chose to attack. But we didn't. "Stand down weapons," Vrill'Zax ordered quietly. "Initiate withdrawal to observation distance." No one questioned the order. We had all seen the same images, all heard the same planetary chorus, All witnessed the same irrational, magnificent defiance. "Send a message to High Command," the Admiral continued. "Inform them that integration of Sol 3 will require reassessment of standard protocols." As our dreadnought retreated to a respectful distance, I found myself both professionally fascinated and personally terrified by what we had discovered. A species that had evolved to be completely vulnerable for a third of its existence had compensated by becoming utterly irrationally fearless during the other two-thirds. But that wasn't the most disturbing revelation. 3 days later, as we maintained our observation position, our long-range sensors detected something impossible. Ships emerging from slip space at the edge of the Sol system, hundreds of them, representing dozens of species including our bitter rivals, the Vrex Combine and the Thalassian Communion. They hadn't been bluffing after all. Somehow, in the brief window between our arrival and my diplomatic mission, they had reached out to the wider galactic community, and the wider galactic community had responded. As I watched the unprecedented gathering of interstellar powers on our tactical display, I finally understood what made humans truly dangerous. If the hegemony's first mistake was underestimating humans, our second was assuming they'd play by anyone else's rules. In the 62 standard days since our initial encounter, the diplomatic landscape had transformed with a speed that left our bureaucracy gasping for respiratory fluid. Let me catch you up, dear readers of the Galactic Historical Archive. Following the standoff in Earth orbit, High Command had recalled the inevitable dominance for strategic reassessment. This is bureaucratic speak for holy shit, what just happened. I was retained as the primary xenoanthropologist assigned to human studies, largely because no one else wanted the job. Failure tends to stick to one's carapace in hegemony culture. We established an observation post at the edge of the Sol system, officially labeled as a diplomatic mission. In reality, we were under orders to monitor this unexpected development, the formation of what humans were calling the Sol Accord. The initial gathering of diverse galactic ships had, against all probability, evolved into legitimate diplomatic relations. 17 major powers and 32 independent worlds had established embassies on Earth or their orbital platforms. Even the notoriously isolationist Phlox had sent representatives, floating their gelatinous bodies through the halls of the United Nations in specially designed mobility tanks. "It makes no sense," Kitkalak clicked irritably, her mandibles working overtime as we reviewed the latest intelligence. She'd been reassigned to my team after Vrill'Zax's demotion. The humans have nothing to offer. No unique technologies, no strategic resources, no military advantage. Why this sudden rush to alliance? I adjusted my sensory frills thoughtfully. I believe it's what humans call fear of missing out. Missing out on what? They're primitives. Primitives who managed to simultaneously contact 17 interstellar powers while we were breathing down their necks, I reminded her. That suggests either extraordinary diplomatic skills or access to communications technologies we don't understand. The truth, as we later discovered, was both simpler and more disturbing. Humans hadn't needed advanced technology or diplomatic genius. They'd used something far more powerful: curiosity. Captain Jason Tucker, that persistent irritant, had explained it during a surprisingly candid interview with the Galactic Press Association. "We just asked questions," he'd said with that infuriating shrug of his. "When we detected the hegemony ships approaching, we figured we should get a second opinion on their reputation. So we broadcast wide-spectrum queries on all the communication frequencies we could access. Basically said, 'Hey, there's a big scary empire showing up. Anyone else out there who can tell us what their deal is?' The audacity was breathtaking. Most emerging species cowered when confronted by a dominant power. Humans went comparison shopping. But I'm digressing. The point is, we were watching and waiting for the humans' beginner's luck to run out. We didn't have to wait long. The crisis began, as so many do with something seemingly insignificant, A Thalassian survey vessel reported unusual readings from a previously unmapped nebula in Sector 87, approximately 12 light-years from Earth. Routine stuff. Spatial anomalies are common in that region due to the remnants of an ancient supernova. What wasn't routine was how quickly the anomaly grew. Within 14 standard days, the nebula had developed what astrophysicists termed a dimensional irregularity. In layman's terms, space itself was developing a leak. The Galactic Council, a largely ceremonial body that rarely did anything beyond issuing strongly worded proclamations, called an emergency session. As a hegemony observer, I was permitted to attend, though our influence had waned considerably since the Earth debacle. Council Chairperson Xylith of the Ardani Collective gave the session to order. Ardani don't actually have gavels. They use sonically amplified bioluminescent organs to signal the beginning of proceedings, but bioluminesced the session to order. Doesn't have the same ring to it. Esteemed representatives, Xylith pulsed, their skin flashing in formal patterns. We face an unprecedented spatial distortion that threatens multiple sectors. The Thalassian Communion has generously shared their findings. Ambassador Glopa of the Thalassians floated to the center of the chamber, his water-filled environmental suit gurgling softly. The anomaly is expanding at an exponential rate. Our models predict catastrophic dimensional collapse within 60 standard days, potentially affecting 17 inhabited systems. The chamber erupted in the multi-dimensional cacophony that passes for concerned murmuring among diverse species. 17 systems meant trillions of lives. Can it be contained? Demanded the Vrex representative, his exoskeleton flushing a dangerous purple. Our preliminary attempts have been unsuccessful, Glopa admitted. The anomaly appears to be intelligent. A new silence fell over the chamber, the special kind of silence that occurs when everyone is simultaneously thinking, "Oh shit." Into this silence stepped the human representative. I recognized her, Dr. Susan Walker, an astrophysicist, who'd been part of my initial diplomatic contact. Unlike many of the elaborate ceremonial outfits worn by other species, she wore a simple blue suit with the Earth insignia. "If I may," she said, her voice calm, "we have some experience with similar phenomena." Xylith, skin flickered with skepticism. "Earth has encountered dimensional rifts." "Not exactly," Dr. Walker admitted, "but we've theorized about them extensively, and more importantly, we've developed potential mitigation strategies." The Vrex representative chittered dismissively. "Theoretical strategies from a non-spacefaring species." Dr. Walker smiled, that same unnerving expression I'd seen during our first meeting. "Not submission, something else. We may be new to actual interstellar travel, but humans have been imagining solutions to cosmic disasters for centuries. It's something of a hobby for us." I leaned forward, suddenly alert. This connected to something I'd observed in my studies of human culture, their peculiar fascination with disaster scenarios. While most species avoided contemplating extinction, humans produced entertainment about it. Furthermore, Dr. Walker continued, the very trait that xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax here found so peculiar about us might be relevant. She nodded in my direction, and I felt my cardiac sacs constrict in surprise at being directly addressed. "I'm afraid I don't follow." Xylith pulsed. "Dreams," Dr. Walker said simply. "When humans sleep, we dream. Our unconscious minds process information in ways our waking minds cannot. And some of our greatest scientific breakthroughs have come through dreams, from the structure of benzene to the theory of relativity." The chamber erupted again, this time with dismissive hoots, clicks, and pheromone releases. Dr. Walker waited patiently for order to be restored. "I'm not suggesting we'll dream up a solution. I'm suggesting that our neural patterns during sleep might be helpful in understanding the anomaly's behavior." "Explain," demanded Glopa, suddenly interested. "You said the anomaly appears intelligent. What if it's not operating according to four-dimensional physics? What if it's operating on dream logic?" I felt a chill ripple through my sensory membranes. As ludicrous as it sounded, there was a certain twisted logic to her proposal. We would need to study the anomaly directly, Dr. Walker continued. Earth volunteers to lead the research mission. And just like that, a preeminent spacefaring civilization found itself accepting help from the new kids on the galactic block. While the Council deliberated on Earth's proposal, I received an unexpected invitation to a private meeting of the Oblivion Compact. If you're not familiar with galactic politics, and really who could blame you, the Oblivion Compact is the shadowy organization that the official powers pretend doesn't exist. It's where the hegemony, the Vrill'Zax Combine, the Thalassian Communion, and other major players discuss things too delicate for public forums. In 12,000 cycles it had never invited an observer of my rank, which meant either I was about to be promoted or executed. In hegemony culture, the two are sometimes the same thing. The meeting took place on a cloaked station in neutral space. I was escorted to a circular chamber where representatives sat in partial darkness. Only their outlines were visible, a precaution against both identity confirmation and assassination. Xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax. Intoned a voice I recognized as belonging to High Marshal J. Taxic of the Hegemony War Council. You have studied the humans extensively. We require your assessment. I shifted nervously. Regarding what aspect, specifically, High Marshal? Their potential threat level, came a different voice. The distinctive harmonic tones of a Rex Imperator. This anomaly situation concerns us. I don't understand, I admitted. The humans are offering assistance with a natural phenomenon. A gurgling laugh emerged from the Thalassian section. Natural? Is that what you believe? My confusion must have been evident even in the dim light, because the High Marshal elaborated. The timing is suspicious. Humans appear on the galactic stage, and suddenly a dimensional anomaly threatens multiple systems, prompting them to offer their unique expertise. You think they caused it? I couldn't hide my disbelief. That's impossible. They barely have FTL capability. So they want us to believe, said the Vrill'Zax Imperator. Yet they managed to contact 17 powers simultaneously when the hegemony arrived. Their technology level is inconsistent. I considered my next words carefully, aware that my continued existence likely depended on them. With respect, what would be their motive? The anomaly threatens Earth as well. Perhaps a calculated risk, suggested a new voice. The cold, mechanical tones of a mechanoid collective representative sacrifice their homeworld to establish themselves as saviors of the galaxy. That's not consistent with human psychology, I argued. They're irrationally attached to their planet of origin. Human psychology, spat the Vrill'Zax. You speak as if these creatures are comprehensible. They deliberately render themselves unconscious for a third of their lives. And there it was, again. That fixation on human sleep patterns. I began to wonder if there was something more to this peculiarity than I'd initially realized. Regardless, the High Marshal cut in. The Compact has reached a decision. The humans will be permitted to assist with the anomaly research, but under strict supervision. Meanwhile, contingency measures will be implemented. What contingency measures? I asked, a sense of foreboding spreading through my nervous system. That is not your concern, xenoanthropologist. You are to continue your observation and report any unusual human activities directly to this council. I was being asked to spy. No, ordered to spy. And something told me that the contingency measures didn't bode well for Earth. The human research vessel, Persistence, departed for the anomaly 14 standard days later. It was a retrofitted science ship, enhanced with Thalassian scanning technology and Vrill'Zax defensive systems, a gesture of cooperation that also ensured the humans couldn't do anything without their new allies knowing about it. Captain Tucker, naturally, was in command. The universe has a perverse sense of humor that way. Nice ship you've got here, I commented during my pre-launch inspection, trying to sound casual despite my new role as an informant. Tucker grinned, running a hand along a console. She's a beauty, Amazing how helpful everyone's been with the upgrades. The Council recognizes the importance of your mission, I said diplomatically. Yeah, I bet they do. Tucker's expression shifted subtly. Funny how quickly we went from potential tribute payers to essential partners. I adjusted my sensory frills in discomfort. The anomaly changed the calculus. Huh. He studied me with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. And what's changed your calculus? Vrill'Zax. Last I checked, you were a cultural expert, not a military inspector. My cardiac sacs nearly seized. This is a routine diplomatic oversight. Save it. Tucker interrupted, his tone still friendly but with an edge I hadn't heard before. We both know you're reporting to someone. I don't even blame you. Following orders is following orders in any species. I stood silent, uncertain how to respond. Tucker sighed. Look, I'm going to tell you something important and you can pass it up your chain of command or not. That's your call. But this anomaly, it's not what anyone thinks it is. Meaning we've seen the pattern before in our history. Not on this scale, but the signature is similar. Your people have encountered dimensional rifts? I asked skeptically. Not exactly. His expression turned grim. But we've encountered things that hide behind natural phenomena. Things that use fear and confusion as weapons before they strike. A chill rippled through my sensory membranes. Are you suggesting the anomaly is a weapon? I'm suggesting it's a distraction. Tucker leaned closer. While everyone's looking at the shiny space-time rupture, nobody's watching the shadows. Before I could question him further, Dr. Walker arrived with the rest of the research team. Tucker straightened up, his serious expression replaced with his typical easy smile. All aboard who's coming aboard, he announced cheerfully. We've got a universe to save and an inadvisable amount of coffee to consume while doing it. As I departed the vessel, I couldn't shake the sense that I'd just been given a warning or perhaps a test. Either way, I dutifully reported the conversation to my compact handlers, though I found myself downplaying Tucker's concerns about things in the shadows. Perhaps that was my first act of treason. Small, seemingly insignificant. The persistence reached the anomaly 2 days later. Initial reports were broadcast across all Galactic Council channels. Unprecedented transparency that had traditional powers like the hegemony deeply uncomfortable. Dimensional variance exceeding expected parameters. Came Dr. Walker's voice, accompanied by streams of data. Gravitational lensing suggests a connection to somewhere else. Define somewhere else, demanded the Vrex observer on the Council communication channel. Working on that, Walker replied calmly. But our preliminary hypothesis that we're looking at a controlled breach, not a natural phenomenon. The news sent shockwaves through the galactic community. If the anomaly was artificial, who created it? And why? The compact called another emergency session. This time, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The humans know more than they're revealing, insisted the Vrill'Zax Imperator. Their arrival and this breach cannot be coincidental. Perhaps, acknowledged the High Marshal, but our intelligence suggests they are genuinely concerned. They've evacuated 3 colony outposts near the affected sector. A cover for their complicity, argued the Thalassian representative. I listened with growing unease. The compact was talking itself into a dangerous consensus that humans represented a threat that needed to be eliminated, preemptively and decisively. Before we take irreversible action, I ventured, we should consider that we still know very little about this anomaly or its purpose. Your continued fascination with these creatures is noted, xenoanthropologist, the Vrill'Zax Imperator said coldly. But the compact has reached its decision. The contingency plan is authorized. I felt my scales flatten in distress. What exactly does this contingency entail? The High Marshal's voice was emotionless. The anomaly will be collapsed using a synchronized quantum detonation. Any vessels within the affected zone will be regrettably lost, including the Persistence, including Tucker, Walker, and the human research team. That would be an act of war, I said, unable to hide my horror. An unfortunate accident during a crisis, corrected the mechanoid representative. Tragic but unavoidable in the circumstances. And if Earth objects, the Vrill'Zax Imperator's voice turned smug. Then they will face the combined might of the compact. Their new friends will find diplomatic reasons to withdraw support when presented with evidence of human experimentation with dimensional weapons. It was elegant in its brutality. Eliminate the human researchers, implicate Earth in creating the anomaly, and crush them when they protested their innocence. The galaxy would return to its comfortable status quo, with the compact powers firmly in control. There was just one problem. The humans will see it coming, I said quietly. What was that, xenoanthropologist? The High Marshal demanded. Captain Tucker already suspects a setup, I explained, surprising myself with my candor. He mentioned watching the shadows rather than the anomaly. If you move against them, they'll be ready. With what? The Vrill'Zax scoffed. Their primitive weapons, their handful of allies, they are nothing. I thought of Tucker's casual disregard for our dreadnought, of Earth's civilians forming a defensive line with leisure vessels, of a species that could render itself completely vulnerable for 8 hours every day, and somehow survive. I believe, I said carefully, that underestimating humans is unwise. The chamber fell silent, and I realized I'd said too much. My loyalty was now in question. Your concerns are noted, the High Marshal said finally. You are dismissed, xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax. Report to Hegemony Security for debriefing, which was bureaucratic speak for prepare for interrogation. I left the chamber knowing two things with certainty. First, the compact was about to make a catastrophic mistake. Second, I could no longer stand by and watch it happen. As I made my way to what would undoubtedly be an unpleasant session with Hegemony Security, my personal communicator vibrated an unexpected message on a frequency I didn't recognize. The text was simple. When you dream, you see the truth. J.T. Tucker. Somehow, he'd accessed my private channel, and he was sending me, what? A human platitude. A code. Before I could decipher it, the message continued. Sleep on it, Vrill'Zax. Then make your choice. Sleep on it. The human phrase meant to delay a decision until after their unconscious period, as if surrender to vulnerability somehow granted clarity. Absurd. Except, what if their sleep wasn't a vulnerability at all? What if, as Dr. Walker had suggested, it was a different mode of consciousness, one that perceived things we couldn't? I made a decision that would either prove to be the greatest insight of my career, or its ignoble end. Instead of reporting to security, I diverted to my private quarters and activated the emergency lockdown protocol. Then, against every instinct of my species, I deliberately induced a state similar to human sleep, using a neural suppressor from the xenobiology lab. As consciousness faded, my last coherent thought was that the hegemony would likely execute me for treason. My first thought upon awakening was considerably more alarming. The compact wasn't trying to stop the anomaly. They had created it, and the humans knew. The problem with treason is that there's no instruction manual, no betraying your species for dummies to consult when you've realized your civilization is on the wrong side of history. I was improvising, and for a species that evolved through meticulous planning and hierarchy, improvisation is not our strong suit. My artificial sleep had left me with a certainty I couldn't explain. The compact had engineered the anomaly as a pretext to eliminate humanity. The how remained unclear, but the why was becoming painfully obvious. Humans represented unpredictability in a galaxy that the major powers had carefully arranged to be very, very predictable. I had approximately 26 minutes before Hegemony Security overrode my quarters lockdown. 26 minutes to decide where my loyalties truly lay. With a civilization that had raised me, or with a bizarre sleep-addicted species that somehow kept revealing uncomfortable truths about the universe. The decision made itself when my neural implant displayed a classified alert. The compact's contingency plan had been accelerated. The synchronized quantum detonation was now scheduled for 16 hours from now, not the original 48. Whatever Tucker and the humans had discovered near the anomaly had spooked the compact badly enough to rush their timetable. I accessed the emergency evacuation protocols, overrode the security lockouts using my xenoanthropologist credentials, and slipped aboard a research shuttle. By the time the alarm sounded, I was already breaking orbit, transmitting forged research authorization codes. My destination? The dimensional anomaly, and hopefully, the persistence. If I was going to commit treason, I might as well be thorough about it. Approaching the anomaly was like flying into the universe's most disturbing light show. Space itself seemed to ripple and fold, creating visual effects that made my sensory frills curl in distress. Even the shuttle's navigation systems were struggling, throwing up error messages as reality itself became negotiable. Unidentified vessel. This is Earth. Ship persistence. You're entering a hazardous research zone. Please identify yourself and state your purpose. The voice wasn't Tucker's. It was female, probably Dr. Walker. This is xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax of the hegemony, I transmitted. I have critical information regarding the anomaly and the compact's intention. A pause, then verify your identity with reference code Alpha 79er. I blinked in confusion. I don't have a reference code. I've defected. Another pause, longer this time. Then Captain Tucker's voice. Well, that's not something you hear every day. Approach on Vector 27 and prepare to dock. Any weapons aboard your vessel? Only my sparkling personality, I replied, attempting human humor to demonstrate my sincerity. Tucker's laugh came through the comm. Still needs work, but you're getting there. Follow our guidance beacon. The docking procedure was tense. I half expected to be spaced the moment I stepped through the airlock. Instead, I found myself in a surprisingly informal debriefing room with Tucker, Walker, and two armed security officers, whose expressions suggested they'd be delighted to use me for target practice. So, Tucker said, leaning against a table casually, you've decided to commit high treason after a nap. That's very human of you. I didn't nap, I corrected. I deliberately induced a sleep-like state after receiving your message. Tucker's eyebrows rose. And I believe the compact created the anomaly as a pretense to eliminate humanity. They're planning a synchronized quantum detonation in approximately 15 hours, which will collapse the anomaly and destroy this vessel. They'll then blame Earth for creating the dimensional rift as a weapon, giving them justification for military action. Dr. Walker exchanged looks with Tucker. That tracks with our findings. The anomaly's quantum signature matches experimental technology we know the Vrill'Zax were developing. The question, Tucker said, studying me intently, is why you're telling us this. What made you switch sides? I considered the question. In truth, I wasn't entirely sure myself. Your species is disruptive, but the compact's response is disproportionate, and I hesitated, struggling to articulate something I didn't fully understand. And what? Tucker prompted. And when I entered the sleep state, I saw something, felt something. A certainty that didn't come from logical analysis. Dr. Walker leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested. You experienced dream cognition, if that's what you call it. I agreed uncomfortably. Is this how humans make decisions, based on feelings during unconsciousness? Sometimes our most profound insights come when we stop trying to force them. Walker explained. The unconscious mind processes information differently, makes connections the conscious mind misses. It's also why we're so good at rolling with the punches, Tucker added. When shit hits the fan, we don't waste time second-guessing. We react based on gut feelings that have been percolating while we sleep. I was skeptical. That's hardly a sound basis for species survival. Tucker shrugged. And yet, here we are. Now, about this quantum detonation. I've participated in many strategic planning sessions throughout my career with the hegemony. They typically involve elaborate protocols, formal presentations, and rigid hierarchies of input. The humans' approach was different. "All right, folks," Tucker announced to the assembled crew in what they called the mess hall, a communal eating space that doubled as a meeting area. "The good news is we've confirmed the anomaly is artificial. The bad news is it's going to be collapsed on top of us in about 14 hours, along with enough quantum energy to turn us into interesting new particles." The crew's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of panic, there was a ripple of dark laughter. One human actually muttered, "Tuesday, am I right?" Tucker continued, pacing energetically. "Dr. Walker's team has determined this isn't just a random dimensional tier. It's a controlled gateway, designed to look unstable. The compact built it as a frame job." "Question," called out a bearded human. "If they're trying to frame us, why not just blow us up conventionally? Why the elaborate setup?" "Politics," Dr. Walker answered. "A direct attack would be naked aggression. This way they can claim we were experimenting with prohibited technology that backfired." "So what's the play, Cap?" asked a female officer. "We're outgunned and we can't outrun a quantum detonation." Tucker smiled, that same disturbing expression I was beginning to recognize as humanity's response to impossible odds. "Who says we need to outrun it? Vrill'Zax, enlighten them about the compact's contingency plan." All eyes turned to me. I cleared my throat nervously, a human gesture I'd unconsciously adopted. "The plan involves a synchronized detonation of quantum disruptors at precise coordinates surrounding the anomaly. The resulting energy wave will collapse the dimensional gateway and anything within it." "And what happens to the energy from the collapsed gateway?" Tucker prompted. "In theory, it's channeled into subspace, preventing catastrophic discharge into normal space," I explained. "And if the gateway isn't what they think it is?" Tucker pressed. I hesitated as understanding dawned. If it's not just a gateway but something more complex, the energy could be redirected. "Bingo." Tucker slapped the table triumphantly. "They've built a loaded gun and they're about to pull the trigger. We're just going to adjust where it's pointing." What followed was the most chaotic, unstructured, and bizarrely effective planning session I've ever witnessed. Ideas were shouted out, challenged, refined, discarded, resurrected, and transformed. No deference to rank or specialty. A maintenance technician's suggestion was given the same consideration as the chief science officer's. By hour 11, they had a plan. It was, to my sensibilities, completely insane, which I was beginning to understand gave it a fighting chance of success. There was just one problem. This is a one-way mission for whoever stays behind. "To calibrate the redirection field," I pointed out. "The timing window is too narrow for evacuation." Tucker nodded grimly. "Yep, that's why I'll be doing it." "The hell you will," Dr. Walker objected immediately. "You're the captain. The crew needs you for what comes next." "That's not how this works, Susan," Tucker replied quietly. "Captain stays with the ship." "Actually," interrupted the bearded human Dr. Reed, their quantum physicist, "it needs to be me. The calibration equations require real-time adjustments that only I can calculate quickly enough." The argument that followed was heated, passionate, and profoundly uncomfortable for me to witness. In hegemony hierarchy, sacrifice assignments were determined by rank and value calculation matrices, logical, dispassionate. These humans were fighting for the right to die. In the end, it came down to capability. Dr. Reed's expertise was irreplaceable for the mission. He would stay behind, along with 2 volunteers, a propulsion engineer named Peterson and a quantum technician called Martinez. The rest of us would evacuate on the Persistence and my shuttle, withdrawing to a theoretically safe distance to observe the results of their modifications to the compact's trap. As the crew made final preparations, I found Tucker in the observation lounge, staring at the writhing anomaly. "This isn't the first time humans have sacrificed themselves for others," I said, attempting to offer some consolation. Tucker smiled faintly. Not by a long shot, but it never gets easier. In the hegemony, we view sacrifice as a logical transaction. The needs of the many. Save the philosophy, Tucker interrupted. Reed isn't staying behind because of some cold equation. He's doing it because of his kids. His offspring? I was confused. Wouldn't that be more reason to preserve himself? He's preserving their future, Tucker said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. Every human on this ship is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's love. Reed sees all of them when he makes this choice. I remained silent, struggling to comprehend. That's what's missing in your hegemony thinking, Vrill'Zax. You've optimized yourselves into a corner. You see patterns and protocols and logic chains. We see people. Before I could respond, the evacuation alarm sounded. Our withdrawal was tense but orderly. The remaining crew aboard the Persistence displayed a strange mixture of emotions, grieving already for their doomed colleagues, while focusing intently on their duties. Humans, I was learning, had a remarkable capacity to hold contradictory states simultaneously. We positioned ourselves at the calculated safe distance, maintaining communication with the team at the anomaly. Dr. Reed's voice came through periodically, calmly reporting adjustments and readings, as if he were performing a routine experiment, rather than preparing to sacrifice himself. Final calibration complete, he reported at T-minus 15 minutes. Redirection field is stable. When the detonation hits, it should channel the energy back through the gateway's own network. Back to its source, Tucker confirmed, right into the compact's lap. That's the theory, Reed acknowledged. Of course, we could just be vaporized. Science is about testing hypotheses. Tucker's laugh sounded forced. Your kids are going to be so proud, Ellen. Tell them, Reed's voice caught. Tell them I was thinking of them. Count on it, Tucker promised. Now finish the job and we'll name a really big explosion after you. T-minus 5 minutes arrived with a detection of multiple quantum signatures activating around the anomaly. The compact's synchronized detonators. Right on schedule, Reed commented. Martinez, Peterson final checks. Redirection field at 100%, reported Martinez. Anomaly stable, gateway aligned, added Peterson. Whatever happens, it's been an honor. T-minus 1 minute. Tucker, Reed said, his voice suddenly less formal. Make sure this means something. It will, Tucker promised. History won't forget the Persistence. T-minus 30 seconds. Dr. Walker moved to stand beside Tucker, their hands finding each other in a gesture of human comfort. T-minus 10 seconds. For Earth, Reed said simply. And then the universe went white. The quantum detonation was both less and more spectacular than I expected. From our distance, it manifested as a silent flash that momentarily outshone the nearest stars, followed by a rippling distortion of space itself as the anomaly collapsed, but collapsed inward, not outward as the compact had planned. The energy discharge didn't dissipate into surrounding space. Instead, it funneled back through the gateway network, following the path that Reed and his team had painstakingly calibrated with their final acts. Did it work? Someone asked into the stunned silence that followed. Tucker was staring at the sensor readings, his expression unreadable. We're about to find out. The answer came 12 minutes later when our communications array picked up a massive spike in emergency transmissions from Vrek space. The quantum backlash had erupted at a secret compact facility, destroying not only their research installation, but also a significant portion of their military fleet gathered to witness the elimination of the human problem. A catastrophic blow to the compact's plans, and a devastating loss for humanity. 3 lives sacrificed to save their species. I expected celebration or at least satisfaction. Instead, the observation deck was eerily quiet as the full impact of what had happened sank in. We need to get back to Earth, Tucker finally said. They have to be warned about what's coming. The journey back to Sol System was tense but uneventful. The compact, reeling from the unexpected reversal of their trap, had temporarily withdrawn their forces to regroup, but no one aboard the Persistence harbored any illusions about what would follow. "They'll come for us directly now," Dr. Walker predicted during one of our strategy sessions. "No more frame jobs or political maneuvering." "Good," Tucker said with a grim determination that sent chills through my sensory frills. "Let's take the gloves off." Upon our return, Earth's response to the loss of the Persistence team was unlike anything in my experience. There was grief, yes, public memorials, mourning rituals, tribute displays, but it was interwoven with something else, something that transformed sorrow into steel. I witnessed this transformation most dramatically during the global broadcast of the memorial service. Dr. Reed's family was present, his mate and 2 adolescent offspring. In hegemony culture, they would be expected to denounce him for choosing the collective over his familial unit. Instead, his female offspring approached the communication podium, her face wet with tears. "My father once told me," she said, her young voice steady despite her grief, "that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what's right anyway." A murmur ran through the gathered humans. "The compact thought they could break us by forcing impossible choices," she continued. "They don't understand that humans have been making impossible choices since we first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them." Her voice strengthened, tears still flowing freely. "They think sacrifice weakens us. They're wrong. Each sacrifice becomes part of us, fuels us, reminds us what we're fighting for." She looked directly into the global transmission cameras, and I felt a primal shiver despite being safely removed from her line of sight. "To those who planned this attack, you've awakened something you don't understand. You've taken my father. Now watch what humanity does in his name." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Not cheers or battle cries, but a deep resonant hum that started in the memorial hall and spread throughout the transmission as humans worldwide joined in. A spontaneous, unified expression that needed no word. I turned to Tucker, who stood watching with tears tracking unashamed down his face. "What is happening?" "That," he said quietly, "is humanity finding its war voice." In the days that followed, I observed a transformation that defied all xenoanthropological models. Earth's previously fractious nations united with singular purpose, their military forces reorganized with astonishing speed, abandoning conventional formations for fluid, adaptive structures that made no sense to traditional strategists. Most disturbing to the compact observers, Earth went quiet. The previously chatty open species suddenly locked down their communications, pulled back their diplomatic missions, and began operating under what they called wartime protocols. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the escalating crisis. I attended as an advisor, my defection now public and my expertise on human behavior suddenly in high demand. "They're preparing for something," the Vrill'Zax representative insisted, their exoskeleton flushing angry orange. "Our intelligence suggests massive mobilization, but we can't determine their strategy or targets." "Perhaps because your intelligence network has been compromised," suggested the Thalassian delegate acidly. The Vrill'Zax facility's destruction had fractured the compact's unity, with former allies now openly suspicious of each other. "The humans have made no formal declaration of hostilities," observed the Ardani chairperson. "Perhaps diplomatic resolution remains possible." I cleared my throat, drawing the council's attention. "With respect, chairperson, Earth has declared war. Not through formal diplomatic channels, but through cultural signals that are unmistakable to their own people." "Explain," demanded the Vrill'Zax. "The memorial service was not merely a grief ritual," I said. "It was a commitment to collective action. The humming sound was a phenomenon humans call resonance, their way of declaring unity without words. Primitive, tribal behavior," dismissed the Vrill'Zax. "Underestimating human behavior is what created this crisis," I countered. Their sleep cycles, which we perceived as vulnerability, actually grant them cognitive advantages, intuitive problem-solving, emotional processing, stress resilience. They're not fighting according to conventional doctrine because they don't think according to conventional patterns. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "What are they planning, xenoanthropologist?" asked the Ardani chairperson finally. I gestured helplessly. "I don't know, and that should terrify all of us." The answer came 3 days later, and it was indeed terrifying, though not in the way anyone expected. I was at the Earth Embassy, consulting with Tucker on evacuation protocols for neutral species, when the first reports arrived. The Vrill'Zax Combine's Central Command Nexus had gone completely offline, not attacked, not destroyed, simply disconnected from all communication networks. "It's starting," Tucker said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "What is?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. Before he could answer, more reports flooded in. The Thalassian high-security diplomatic mainframe, isolated and theoretically impenetrable, was broadcasting its contents across public channels. The Mechanoid Collective's synchronization network had fragmented, with individual units suddenly operating independently. "What have you done?" I whispered, awe and horror mingling in my voice. Tucker smiled that unnerving human smile. "We didn't sleep." "What?" "For the past 72 hours, Earth's best minds haven't slept at all." He showed me a medical injector, stimulants, meditation techniques, rotation teams. We've been working in a different state of consciousness, the hyper-focused clarity that comes just before exhaustion. "But why?" "Your sleep is a strength." "Yes," Tucker agreed. "But sometimes you need a different kind of strength. The compact thinks in patterns. Right now, we're not. We're thinking in intuitive leaps that make no logical sense until they work." He gestured to a tactical display showing the spreading chaos throughout compacta systems. No direct attacks, no fleet movements, no conventional warfare at all. "Then what is this?" I demanded. "We call it systems cancer," Tucker explained. "Small, seemingly benign infiltrations that spread and multiply, code packets that reconfigure themselves based on the immune response, programs that mimic natural system behaviors until they suddenly don't." "But how did you penetrate their security?" Tucker's expression darkened. "They've been studying us since first contact." "Well, guess what? We've been studying them too. Every diplomatic exchange, every technical collaboration, every cultural sharing session, we were mapping vulnerabilities." I stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The compact's military superiority was meaningless against this invisible onslaught. No targets to shoot at, no enemies to engage, just their own systems turning against them, reconfiguring in ways their designers never anticipated. "This isn't warfare," I said finally. "This is cognitive insurgency." "Exactly," Tucker nodded approvingly. "We can't match their firepower, so we're changing the nature of the conflict, making them fight themselves." "And the next phase?" I asked, both dreading and needing to know. Tucker's eyes met mine, and I saw something ancient and implacable in them. The look of a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and their own self-destructive tendencies. "Now we offer them a choice," he said quietly. "Stand down, acknowledge what they've done, accept new limitations on their power, or discover just how creative sleep-deprived humans can get when protecting what's ours." Outside the embassy windows, Earth's citizen defense fleet was launching thousands of small craft, each modified with technologies that shouldn't exist, piloted by humans who shouldn't have been able to master them so quickly. "The compact believed that our need for sleep made us vulnerable," Tucker continued, watching the fleet rise into the darkening sky. "What they failed to understand is that a species that can lose consciousness for 8 hours every day and still survive doesn't fear anything, not even the unknown." He turned to me. his expression both weary and determined. They're about to learn why that's a mistake. And as I watched humanity mobilize, not with the mechanical precision of the hegemony or the hive mind synchronicity of the Vrill'Zax, but with the adaptive, unpredictable vigor of a species that dreamed even while preparing for war, I realized the fundamental truth that the compact had missed. The species that sleeps is the species that dreams, and the species that dreams is the most dangerous of all. The trouble with changing sides in an interstellar conflict is the paperwork. That's not a joke. The actual documentation required to transition from respected xenoanthropologist of the hegemony to tolerated advisor to the humans was staggering. Earth's bureaucracy, it turned out, was one of their more terrifying weapons. "This section requires your species identification," muttered the beleaguered administrative officer processing my asylum request. "Vrill'Zaxian," I supplied. He blinked. "That's not on our list." "Of course it's not on your list. You've known about other species for less than a standard year." He sighed. The universal sound of bureaucratic resignation. "I'll just put other and attach an appendix." This thrilling exchange occurred in an underground facility beneath what humans called Montana, one of thousands of command centers that had sprung up across Earth in the days following the Compact's failed attack. While the upper echelons of human military focused on their system's cancer strategy, the rest of their civilization was adapting with bewildering speed. "All done," the administrator announced, stamping my documentation with unnecessary force. "You're officially a consultant on xenobiological affairs. That gets you level 3 clearance and a meal card." "What does level 3 clearance authorize me to do?" I asked. "No idea," he admitted cheerfully. "We made up these security protocols yesterday, and therein lay humanity's most unsettling advantage. They were making it up as they went along. The initial success of humanity's unconventional warfare had thrown the Compact into disarray, but it wouldn't last. The Vrill'Zax Collective had already isolated their secondary command systems from contamination. The Thalassians had reverted to analog communication methods that couldn't be hacked. The mechanoids were performing full consciousness transfers to clean units. They're adapting. I warned Captain Tucker during a strategy session 3 days after my official designation as not the enemy. The Compact has existed for millennia by assimilating threats. Tucker nodded, unsurprised. We expected that. Phase 1 was just to buy us time. Time for what? His answer was interrupted by Dr. Walker's arrival. She looked exhausted but energized, another human contradiction that still confounded me. "It worked," she announced without preamble. "The Dream Network is online." Tucker's face split into a grin of genuine delight. "All of it. 83% global coverage. We're still mapping the resonance patterns, but the preliminary data is better than we hoped." I looked between them in confusion. Dream Network. They exchanged a glance that I'd learned to interpret as them deciding how much to tell the alien defector. "It's Phase 2, Tucker finally explained, "and it's why we need you." The Dream Network, as they called it, was either humanity's most brilliant innovation or their most insane gamble. Possibly both. We've known for decades that human brains exhibit unique wave patterns during REM sleep, Dr. Walker explained as she led me through a laboratory filled with humans wearing peculiar sensor caps. What we didn't understand until recently was how those patterns could be harmonic. "Harmonic?" I asked, watching technicians monitor screens displaying rhythmic pulses. "Synchronized, but individualized," she clarified. "Like," she paused, searching for an analogy I might grasp. "Like how bioluminescent creatures can flash in patterns that communicate across vast distances." "You're suggesting human dreams communicate?" "Not exactly, but they resonate, create patterns, and those patterns can be directed." She gestured to a central display showing what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of oscillating energy fields spanning the globe. "This is Earth's dreamscape right now. 800 million humans in REM sleep, their subconscious minds processing information in patterns that even they don't consciously understand." I stared at the display, my sensory frills extending in fascination. "You've weaponized sleep." Tucker, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "We've weaponized dreams, and we need your help to deploy it against the compact." The plan, once explained, was so audacious that it bordered on lunacy, which meant it was perfectly human. The compact species all evolve different forms of consciousness, Tucker explained as we stood before a tactical display of known enemy positions throughout the sector. But they share one common trait. They all developed advanced technology to amplify their natural cognitive abilities. "Neural augmentation," I acknowledged. "Standard practice for spacefaring civilizations." "Exactly. The Vrill'Zax use hive mind enhancers. The Thalassians have their aqueous thought amplifiers. The mechanoids upload their consciousness to the collective. And you plan to, what? Hack their neural tech." The idea seemed absurd even by human standards. Dr. Walker smiled. "Not hack, influence." She activated a different display showing the sensor readings from the anomaly before its destruction. "When your people detected our Earth transmissions, what exactly did they pick up?" I considered the question. "Standard electromagnetic communications, radio waves, digital broadcasts, the usual footprint of an emerging technological species. And did anyone analyze the patterns of those transmissions? Not the content, but the wave structures themselves." I frowned, my facial ridges contracting. "I don't believe so. Why would we?" "Because," Tucker said with evident satisfaction, "for the past 70 years, human electronic communications have been shaped by brains that spend a third of their time dreaming. Our technologies, our transmission protocols, our very thinking about communication, all of it influenced by minds that regularly disconnect from reality and create alternative states." The implications slowly dawned on me. "You're suggesting your communications contain dream patterns?" "Embedded in everything we create," Walker confirmed. "Not by design, but by nature. And now, through the dream network, we're making it deliberate." She gestured to the sleeping humans in the laboratory. "Every military communication, every diplomatic exchange, every seemingly innocuous cultural broadcast we've shared with the compact since first contact has contained these patterns their neural technologies have been absorbing and processing. Creating back doors," Tucker added. "In the most secure systems they have their own enhanced consciousness." I felt my cardiac sacs constrict with a mixture of horror and admiration. "You've been infecting their thoughts." "Not yet," Walker corrected. "We've been preparing the ground. Now comes the bloom." The bloom, as they called it, required something unprecedented, a coordinated dream state among billions of humans, targeted at specific patterns that would resonate with the neural technologies used by compact species. And it required me to provide the precise frequencies and modulation patterns that would penetrate the specific neural enhancements used by each species. "This is biological warfare," I protested during one particularly intense planning session. "No," Tucker countered firmly. "It's communication on a level the compact never considered possible. We're not destroying their minds. We're expanding them by forcing them to dream, to experience human consciousness, by sharing how we see the universe," Walker said quietly. "They've spent millennia viewing our sleep cycles as vulnerability. We're going to show them what they've been missing." I wanted to argue further, but something stopped me. Perhaps the memory of my own induced sleep state and the clarity it had brought me. If one artificial sleep session had changed my perspective so dramatically, what might genuine human dream patterns do to the rigid thinking of the compact leadership? "What do you need from me?" I asked finally. Tucker's smile was grim. "Everything you know about how the compact thinks." The preparations took 5 frantic days. 5 days during which the compact regrouped, reinforced, and prepared their counterstrike. Their fleet movements suggested a massive assault forming at the edge of the Salting system. Nearly 3,000 warships from the combined forces of the Vrill'Zax, Thalassians, and mechanoids, with hegemony vessels conspicuously absent following my defection. Earth conventional defenses were hopelessly outmatched. Their few military spacecraft, supplemented by hastily converted civilian vessels, could delay the compact fleet for perhaps hours, not days. The system's cancer that had initially crippled enemy communications was being systematically purged. By all traditional military assessments, humanity was doomed, which made their collective calm all the more unnerving. "Shouldn't everyone be panicking?" I asked Tucker as we reviewed the final preparations for the Dream Network's activation. He glanced up from his displays, genuine amusement in his expression. "Why? We've had nuclear weapons pointed at each other for centuries. Existential dread is our comfort zone. But this is different. The compact won't just destroy your civilization. They'll erase your species." "Yeah, well," he shrugged, "we've all seen that movie." I still struggled with human idioms, but his meaning was clear enough. The threat of extinction wasn't new to them. Perhaps that explained their disturbing equanimity in the face of Armageddon. "The fleet has begun its approach," announced a communications officer, "ETA to engagement range, 14 hours. Tucker nodded calmly. "Right on schedule. Dr. Walker, status of the network. Final synchronization underway," she reported. "We'll hit peak global REM cycle in approximately 12 hours. Cutting it close, Tucker observed without apparent concern. "That's assuming it works at all," I felt compelled to point out. "You're attempting to influence highly advanced neural systems through what amounts to mass hallucination." Tucker clapped a hand on my shoulder, a human gesture of camaraderie that still made my sensory frills twitch. "That's why we have backup plans, such as the usual heroic last stands, desperate gambits, possibly some stirring speeches about freedom." I stared at him. "You're joking about extinction." "No," he corrected, his expression suddenly serious. "I'm refusing to accept it as an outcome. There's a difference." Before I could respond, a priority alert sounded. A compact vanguard force had been detected entering the outer Sol system. A rapid strike team dispatched ahead of the main fleet. "They're targeting our lunar outposts," reported the tactical officer. "Attempting to draw our defensive forces out of position," Tucker surmised. "Classic diversion." "We have to respond," insisted Admiral Hayes, the gruff human military commander, who still regarded me with open suspicion. "There are 15,000 civilians on those outposts." Tucker's expression darkened. "Start evacuation protocols. Deploy the Artemis squadron as escort." "The Artemis pilots are all supposed to enter REM cycle in 3 hours for the network," Dr. Walker objected. "Then they'd better fly fast." Tucker's tone left no room for debate. "We don't sacrifice our people for strategy." I observed the exchange with growing fascination. The same humans who had concocted an audacious plan to weaponize their dreams were now potentially compromising it to save a relatively small number of individuals. It was inefficient, illogical, and somehow deeply impressive. The battle for the lunar outposts was brief and brutal. The compact vanguard, primarily Vrill'Zax assault cruisers, expected token resistance from Earth's defensive forces. Instead, they encountered the Artemis Squadron 47 spacecraft piloted by humans who knew they were sacrificing their role in humanity's master plan to save their fellows. The human pilots fought with a ferocity that shocked even me. They employed maneuvers that skirted the edge of survivability, tactics that prioritized civilian evacuation over their own safety. The lunar defense networks, augmented with hastily adapted alien technologies, provided supporting fire that was far more effective than the compact had anticipated. Still, the outcome was never really in doubt. The Vrill'Zax cruisers, though bloodied, achieved orbital superiority within 2 hours. The human evacuation ships, protected by the remaining Artemis fighters, limped back toward Earth. Of the 47 Artemis pilots, 29 returned. Casualties: Tucker asked grimly when the final reports came in. 812 civilians, 18 lunar defense personnel, reported Admiral Hayes, plus our 18 Artemis pilots. Tucker absorbed the news with a tight nod, and the evacuation. Successful. 14,622 civilians extracted. The command center fell silent for a moment, a brief, collective acknowledgement of both loss and achievement. Then Tucker turned to Dr. Walker. The network? Her expression was pained. We're down 29 dreamers from the prime synchronization group. I've ordered substitutions from the backup roster, but it's not ideal. They haven't undergone the same preparatory protocols. Will it work? Tucker pressed. Theoretically, yes, but the pattern coherence will be degraded. Maybe 15% less effective. Then we'll just have to be 15% more persuasive, Tucker declared. Vrill'Zax, I need your final input on the Vrax neural patterns. As I worked with the human team to recalibrate the dream network, I found myself reflecting on the battle we'd just witnessed. The compact had achieved its tactical objective, disrupting Earth's defenses and forcing key personnel away from the main effort. By any logical analysis, it was a successful diversion. Yet the humans didn't seem demoralized. If anything, they worked with greater intensity and focus. The loss of their comrades hadn't weakened their resolve, it had hardened it. I don't understand, I finally said to Dr. Walker as we made the final adjustments. The Vrex achieved their objective. They've compromised your plan, yet everyone seems energized. She looked up from her calculations, her expression thoughtful. Do you know what humans do when we lose someone in battle?
Mourn them.
Yes, but specifically how? I considered what I'd observed of human culture. You honor their memory, create memorials. We say their names, she corrected gently. We tell their stories. We make sure they're remembered not just as statistics, but as people. I frowned. How does this help you fight? Because it reminds us what we're fighting for, she said. Not abstract concepts like species survival or territorial control, but real people with hopes and dreams and terrible jokes and annoying habits. She gestured to a technician who was working furiously nearby. Jeff, over there, lost his sister in the lunar evacuation. She was a hydroponics engineer. 10 hours ago, he was a maintenance tech who'd never touched our synchronization systems. Now he's recalibrating neural interfaces because he stayed up all night, learning how. Out of grief, I asked, still not comprehending. Out of love, she corrected. That's the thing the Compact has never understood about us. We don't fight hardest when we're afraid. We fight hardest when we love what we're fighting for. I looked around the command center with new eyes, seeing not just the frantic activity of a species preparing for a last stand, but the interconnected web of relationships that drove them. Each human. There wasn't just fighting for abstract survival, they were fighting for each other. It was messy, emotional, and profoundly alien to the ordered hierarchies of the Compact, and I was beginning to think it might be their secret weapon. T-2 hours to the main Compact fleet's arrival. Earth executed the most improbable military strategy in galactic history. They went to sleep. Not everyone, of course. Defensive forces remained on high alert. Command centers continued monitoring the approaching armada, but across the planet, nearly 5 billion humans synchronized their sleep cycles, entering REM state within a carefully coordinated window. The Dream Network activated. From my position in the Montana Command Center, I watched the display of Earth combine dreamscape pulse with patterns we had meticulously crafted to resonate with the neural technologies used by each Compact species, patterns that carried not information exactly, but experience, the unique perspective of a consciousness shaped by regular journeys into the unstructured realm of dreams. Transmission commencing, Dr. Walker announced, her voice tight with tension. Pattern propagation at 93% coherence. Any response from the Compact fleet? Tucker asked. Nothing yet, reported the communications officer. They're maintaining approach vector and communications blackout. Minutes stretched into an hour. The compact fleet continued its inexorable advance, now close enough that Earth's defensive systems were tracking individual vessels. No indication that the Dream Network was having any effect. "It's not working," Admiral Hayes declared grimly. "We need to commit our defensive forces while we still can." Tucker held up a hand. "Wait, look at this." He pointed to a subtle shift in the formation of the Rex vessels at the vanguard of the compact fleet. Three cruisers had dropped slightly out of alignment, a tiny discrepancy that would have been imperceptible to anyone unfamiliar with their rigidly precise movement patterns. "They're experiencing cognitive dissonance," I realized aloud. "The dream patterns are creating conflicts in their hive mind synchronization." More disruptions appeared throughout the fleet. Thalassian vessels began executing erratic course corrections. A cluster of mechanoid ships abruptly powered down, drifting out of formation. "It's working," Walker whispered, almost afraid to believe it. The effect spread through the compact fleet like ripples in a pond. Small at first, then increasingly pronounced. Vessels breaking formation, communication patterns fragmenting, coordinated assault protocols disintegrating into individual ship movements. "They're dreaming," I said, awe in my voice. "You forced them to dream. Not human dreams exactly, but something analogous. The ordered hierarchical consciousness of compact species experiencing the unstructured associative patterns of human dream states. Their neural technologies, designed to enhance their natural thought processes, were instead forcing them to perceive reality through an alien cognitive lens. For species that had evolved without sleep cycles, without the regular dissolution and reconstruction of conscious thought that humans took for granted, it was deeply disorienting. "We're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced suddenly. "From the Rex flagship." "On screen," Tucker ordered. The image that appeared was chaotic. Multiple Rex commanders chittering in distress. Their exoskeletons flushed with conflicting color patterns. Their speech was fragmented, jumping between topics without logical progression, the linguistic equivalent of a dream state. "You changing us," one managed to articulate. "Stop. Transformation not authorized." Tucker leaned forward. "This isn't an attack. It's communication. For the first time, you're experiencing how we perceive reality. Wrong perspective," the Rex commander insisted, though with less conviction. "Ordered thought. Superior." "Different, not superior," Tucker corrected. "You've spent millennia evolving one way of thinking. We've spent millennia alternating between two, structured consciousness and dream consciousness. That's our strength. Not that we sleep, but that we can exist in multiple cognitive states." The Rex commander seemed to struggle, its mandibles working furiously. "Fleet compromised. Cannot maintain attack formation." "Then don't attack," Tucker suggested simply. "Dream with us instead." I expected outright rejection. The compact had never negotiated from a position of vulnerability. They conquered or retreated. They did not compromise. But the dream patterns were doing more than disrupting their neural technologies. They were reshaping their concept of possibility itself. "Temporary cessation of hostilities," the Rex commander managed, "until clarity returns." The transmission ended. For a moment, the command center was silent. Then a cheer erupted, restrained at first, then building to a crescendo as the implications sank in. The compact fleet was standing down. "Is it over?" I asked Tucker, hardly daring to believe it. His expression remained cautious. "No. It's just changing." He was right, of course. Even as we celebrated this unprecedented victory, long-range sensors detected a new group of vessels emerging from slip space at the edge of the system. "Hegemony signatures," reported the tactical officer. 12 dreadnoughts, including the inevitable consequence, High Marshal JTAC-6 flagship. The celebrations faltered. The Dream Network, calibrated for Rex, Thalassian, and mechanoid neural patterns, might be less effective against the hegemony's different neural technologies, and unlike the other compact species, the hegemony had intimate knowledge of human tactics, thanks to my previous reports. They'd been waiting, I realized aloud, letting the others test our defenses while they prepared a countermeasure. Can they resist the dream patterns? Walker asked me urgently. I don't know, I admitted, but Jadatexic is brilliant and ruthless. If anyone could find a way to shield against this, it's him. The hegemony fleet accelerated toward Earth with ominous purpose, ignoring the disarrayed compact vessels. They're not even slowing down, Tucker observed grimly. Activate all defensive systems. Earth's remaining military forces, already depleted from the lunar battle, moved to intercept. The orbital defense platforms powered up their retrofitted weapons, but against 12 hegemony dreadnoughts, it was like standing in front of a tidal wave with a bucket. The Dream Network, Tucker asked. Walker. Still active, but we're reaching the end of the synchronized REM cycle, she reported anxiously. Coherence dropping below viable levels within 20 minutes. Tucker's expression hardened. Then we use what time we have. Target all dream pattern transmissions on the hegemony fleet. Even with full coherence, the patterns aren't calibrated for their neural tech, Walker warned. Then we'll give them a nightmare they can't ignore, Tucker declared. Vrill'Zax. What's the hegemony's worst fear? I didn't hesitate. Loss of control. Chaos. The collapse of hierarchical order. Then that's what we'll show them. He turned to Walker. Reconfigure the dream patterns. Show them a future where control is an illusion. As the command team rushed to implement his orders, I watched the approaching hegemony fleet with a growing sense of dread. Even if the Dream Network affected them, Jadatexic might push through by sheer force of will, and if he did, Earth's defenses wouldn't last minutes against 12 dreadnoughts. Tucker seemed to read my thoughts. We've got one more card to play if this fails. What card? His smile was grim. Remember when I said humans have been preparing for extinction-level threats our entire history? He led me to a separate display, showing what appeared to be enormous constructs, hidden throughout Earth's solar system, massive devices that had been concealed within asteroids, moons, and orbital installations. What are those? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We call it the Samson Protocol. If the hegemony breaches Earth defenses, we bring down the pillars of the temple on everyone. You'd destroy your own system to prevent our knowledge, including the Dream Network, from falling into the Compact's hands. He nodded solemnly. In a heartbeat, I stared at him in disbelief. You'd sacrifice your entire species. No, he corrected firmly. We'd ensure our extinction had meaning, that whatever came after us would remember why we fell. The ready willingness of humans to contemplate their own destruction not with despair, but with determined purpose, struck me as both terrifying and admirable. A species that could face oblivion not just with courage, but with a plan to make that oblivion matter. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, I said finally. Always hope, Tucker agreed, but also prepare for when hope isn't enough. As the hegemony fleet entered Earth's outer defense perimeter, Jatexic's face appeared on our communication screen, 8 eye stalks, swiveling with cold precision, threat tendrils fully extended in the ritual posture of imminent conquest. Captain Tucker, he intoned, his voice resonating with the harmonic overtones that signified absolute authority in hegemony culture. Your dream weapon is impressive, but ineffective against us. We have observed its impact on our compact allies and developed countermeasures. Tucker faced the screen calmly. Hi, Marshal Jadatexic. Before you continue your attack, I suggest you look more closely at what's happening to your fleet. Jadexic's eye stalks swiveled in what I recognized as confusion. My fleet is functioning at optimal efficiency. Is it? Tucker's voice was almost gentle. Check your navigational patterns, your formation coherence. A ripple of disquiet passed through Jadexic's threat tendrils, subtle but unmistakable to one who knew hegemony physiological responses. A minor discrepancy. Vrill'Zax dismissed, though I could detect uncertainty creeping into his harmonic tones. Your attempt to replicate your success against the other compact species is futile. We are not susceptible to the same cognitive disruption. We didn't target your neural technology, Tucker revealed. We targeted your structure, your hierarchy, the very concept of order that defines hegemony consciousness. Vrill'Zax's eye stalks froze momentarily, a sign of profound shock in hegemony body language. Impossible, he declared, but with less conviction. Look at your command protocols, Tucker pressed. Your decision trees, the fundamental patterns that organize your thoughts. They're already changing. I watched Vrill'Zax closely, recognizing the subtle signs of cognitive distress that no human would notice. The micro-movements of secondary sensory organs, the fluctuating pigmentation of his central nerve cluster. The dream network was affecting him, not by forcing hegemony minds to dream as humans did, but by introducing the concept of dream logic into their rigidly structured thought patterns. Captain Tucker, Dr. Walker called urgently from her station. Dream coherence, critical. 5 minutes until complete desynchronization. Tucker nodded acknowledgement without taking his eyes from Vrill'Zax. Hi, Marshal, you have a choice to make, and not much time to make it. Continue this attack, and we'll fight to our last breath, and beyond, or recognize that there's more to consciousness than your hegemony has ever imagined, and stand down. Vrill'Zax's threat tendrils writhed in evident conflict. You would destroy yourselves to deny you the victory. Absolutely, Tucker confirmed. Humans don't fear extinction. Hi, Marshal. We've been rehearsing for it our entire history. What we fear is meaningless extinction. A tense silence stretched between them, representative of two utterly different approaches to existence, balanced on the edge of mutual destruction. 3 minutes to desynchronization, Walker reported tensely. Vrill'Zax's eye stalk swiveled toward me. Suddenly, xenoanthropologist Vrill'Zax. You have studied these creatures, you have experienced their dream state. Will they do as they threaten? All eyes in the command center turned to me, humans and hegemony alike waiting for my assessment. In that moment, I understood that I held the fate of both species in my answer. If I confirmed Tucker's threat, Vrill'Zax might withdraw, or might accelerate his attack to prevent the Samson Protocol's activation. If I dismissed it as a bluff, the High Marshal would certainly press his advantage. I thought of everything I had witnessed since my defection, humans sacrificing themselves for others without hesitation, facing extinction not with panic, but with determination, transforming grief into resolve, and most remarkably, turning their perceived greatest weakness into their greatest strength. High Marshal, I said formally, humans don't make threats. They make promises, and their most sacred promise is to one another, that their lives and deaths will have meaning. I gestured to the command center around me. They have prepared for this moment since they first looked at the stars. They would rather burn brightly and briefly than submit to control. Vrill'Zax's threat tendrils contracted, the hegemony equivalent of a resigned sigh. Then it seems we have reached an impasse. No, Tucker countered. We've reached a beginning. Your fleet is already experiencing the edges of a new kind of consciousness. Imagine what we could learn from each other if we chose cooperation over conquest. 1 minute to desynchronization, Walker announced, her voice tight. Vrill'Zax was silent for several excruciating seconds, his eye stalks swiveling between his tactical displays and Tucker's unwavering gaze. Stand down, weapons, he finally ordered, his harmonic tones resonating with what I recognized as profound uncertainty, an emotion almost never expressed by hegemony leadership. The command center erupted in muted exclamations of relief and disbelief. The hegemony fleet's weapon signatures powered down, their advance halting just within Earth, outer defense perimeter. This is not surrender, Vrill'Zax clarified firmly. This is reassessment. Tucker's smile was tired but genuine. That's all we ask, a chance to show you what dreams can teach. As the transmission ended and the immediate threat receded, I found myself experiencing an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't relief exactly, or triumph. It was something deeper, a sense of having witnessed a pivotal moment in galactic history. Humans had confronted the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and prevailed not through superior technology or numbers, but through something far more profound, their fundamentally different way of experiencing consciousness itself. Is it really over? I asked Tucker as the command center burst into celebratory activity around us. He shook his head, his expression serious despite the victory. No, it's just changing. The compact won't give up power easily. This is just the first confrontation in what's likely to be a long, complicated process. But you've shown them something they never expected, I observed. A species that doesn't fear dreams or death. Tucker smiled, that same unsettling expression I'd first seen during our initial encounter, which I now recognized not as bravado but as genuine comfort with uncertainty. That's the thing about humans, Vrill'Zax, he said quietly. We don't give a fuck about dying. We give a fuck about what our dying means, and that makes all the difference. As Earth rotated beneath us, billions of humans awakening from the synchronized dream that had saved their species, I realized the profound truth that the compact had missed, and that I had missed in my initial assessment. Humans weren't dangerous because they slept. They weren't dangerous because they dreamed. They were dangerous because they understood what most species never learn, that consciousness itself is a choice. And they had chosen to embrace all of it, the structured and the chaotic, the logical and the intuitive, the waking and the dreaming. The battle was over. The war for the future of consciousness in the galaxy was just beginning, and for the first time since I'd defected, I was certain I'd chosen the right side. Victory, as it turns out, has a taste. At least that's what Captain Tucker insisted as he poured me a glass of amber liquid he called Kentucky bourbon during the celebration marking 30 days since the compact withdrawal. Humans, I've learned, will use any excuse to introduce intoxicants into their systems. The bourbon burned through my auxiliary digestion tract in a not entirely unpleasant way, triggering a mild euphoria in my tertiary ganglia. To unexpected alliances, Tucker toasted, raising his glass. The assembled diplomatic corps, a motley collection of species that had backed Earth in the confrontation, raised their respective drinking vessels in response. I observed the gathering with anthropological fascination. The Grand Hall of the United Nations had been transformed into a celebration venue, with representatives from 17 species mingling in what humans called cocktail party diplomacy. Even a few Thalassian diplomats were cautiously in attendance, floating in their water tanks at a careful distance from the hegemony delegation. Earth had become, practically overnight, the unlikely diplomatic hub of the sector. The compact's humiliation had shattered its monopoly on power, creating a vacuum that a surprising coalition of previously unaligned worlds was rushing to fill with humans, somehow at the center. They're calling it the Morpheus Accords, Dr. Walker informed me, appearing at my side with her own drink, named after our god of dreams. Appropriate, I acknowledged. Though I'm not sure humans should be so quick to formalize their new position. The compact is wounded, not defeated. Oh, we know. Her smile was confident, but not arrogant. This isn't a victory celebration. It's a strategic regrouping disguised as one. I gestured toward Tucker, who was now enthusiastically demonstrating what appeared to be a human mating dance to a bewildered Ardani diplomat. Someone should inform your captain. Walker laughed. Trust me, that's part of the strategy too. Everyone underestimates humans who appear to be having too much fun. I was about to respond when a commotion near the main entrance caught our attention. A delegation I hadn't expected to see was arriving. High Marshal Vrill'Zax himself, accompanied by senior representatives from the Rex Combine and Thalassian Communion. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations hushed. Security personnel tensed. Even Tucker straightened, his performance of intoxication vanishing as if it had never existed. "This is unexpected," I murmured to Walker. "The formal negotiations aren't scheduled for another 7 days." "Very unexpected," she agreed, her expression concerned. The compact delegation moved purposefully through the crowd, which parted before them like a tide. They stopped directly in front of Tucker, creating a tableau that seemed charged with potential energy. The casual human captain face to face with the formal, imposing figure of J. Taxic, whose threat tendrils were conspicuously restrained in what passed for a diplomatic posture. "Captain Tucker," Judd Taxic intoned, his harmonics carefully modulated to neutral. "We request immediate private audience with Earth's leadership." Tucker raised an eyebrow. "Regarding a matter of urgent mutual concern," J. Taxic replied, "one that cannot be discussed in public forum." Tucker studied the compact leaders for a long moment, then nodded. "The Secretary General's office. 5 minutes." As the delegation moved away, Tucker caught my eye and made a subtle gesture I'd come to recognize as a request to join them. I excused myself from Dr. Walker and followed, curiosity overriding caution. The Secretary General's office was a stark contrast to the celebratory hall, all business, with minimal ornamentation. The compact leaders arranged themselves on one side of a conference table, while Tucker, the Secretary General, Admiral Hayes, and myself took positions opposite them. "This is irregular, High Marshal," the Secretary General began, "but we're listening." J. Taxic's eye stalks swiveled in what I recognized as a gesture of grave concern. "We have detected an anomaly, one far more concerning than the artificial gateway we previously encountered." Tucker leaned forward slightly. "Another compact creation." "No," J. Taxic stated firmly. "This is beyond our capabilities." The Vrex representative, Imperator Kazvex, activated a holographic projector that displayed a region of space near the galactic core. Our long-range sensors detected this phenomenon 72 hours ago. We have been analyzing it since. The hologram zoomed in to show what appeared to be a distortion in space-time, a massive, pulsating anomaly that seemed to bend light around it in impossible patterns. "Is it another dimensional gateway?" Admiral Hayes asked. "No," the Thalassian representative gurgled through his translator. "It is a structure, artificial and ancient, approximately 50,000 years old by our analysis, Che Dakid. And it is awakening." Tucker exchanged glances with the Secretary General. "Awakening how?" "It is emitting energy signatures consistent with activation protocols," J. Taxic explained. "And it appears to be communicating." The hologram shifted to display a series of energy pulses emanating from the structure, regular, rhythmic patterns that were unmistakably deliberate. "We believe," J. Taxic continued, his voice dropping to a lower harmonic register, "that it is responding to your dream network." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "You're suggesting," the Secretary General said carefully, "that an ancient alien structure near the galactic core has been triggered by our dream broadcasts." "Precisely," Judd Taxic confirmed. "The patterns are too similar for coincidence. Whatever this structure is, it recognizes human dream patterns." I studied the compact leaders carefully, my sensory frills extended to detect any deception. "Why bring this to Earth? Why not simply prepare your own response?" Kazavex chittered, mandibles working in the Vrex equivalent of nervous agitation. "Because we have encountered references to such structures in our most ancient records. They are associated with a species known only as the predecessors." "The predecessors," Tucker repeated. "The civilization that supposedly achieved interstellar travel millions of years before any known species," I explained, recalling obscure xenoarchaeological research. Most scientists consider them mythological. Not mythological, J. Taxic corrected. Simply so advanced that their technology appears supernatural to less developed minds, and according to our fragmentary records, they did not disappear, they evolved. Into what? The Secretary General asked. Into beings that exist partially in dream states, the Thalassian representative answered. Consciousnesses that bridge reality and imagination. Tucker sat back, his expression unreadable. And you think they're what? Reaching out to us, because we dream. We think, J. Taxic said gravely, that you humans may be their descendants. The revelation should have been shocking. It should have triggered urgent debates, emergency sessions, frantic research. Instead, Tucker merely nodded, as if receiving confirmation of something long suspected. Show them, he said simply to the Secretary General. She hesitated, then activated her secure terminal. Authorization, Morpheus Protocol, Phase 5. A new hologram appeared, overlaying the compact's projection. It showed the same structure near the galactic core, but with significantly more detail and data that could only have come from much closer observation. You already knew, J. Taxic's eye stalks flattened in shock. We suspected, Tucker corrected, since our first ventures into deep space, 70 years ago, our probes detected fragmentary signals from the structure, signals that resonated with human brainwave patterns during REM sleep. That's impossible, Kazavex chittered in disbelief. Your species barely achieved spaceflight. You couldn't have sent probes to the galactic core. We didn't need to, Tucker explained. The structure broadcasts subspace. Most species filter out the signals as background radiation, but humans, because of how our brains work during sleep, we receive them, unconsciously at first, then with growing awareness. The dream network wasn't just a weapon, I realized aloud. It was a response. Tucker nodded. A response 50 years in the making. We've been studying the signals, incorporating them into our communications technology, preparing to answer when we finally understood enough. But you allowed the compact to believe you were primitive, Taxic accused. You perpetuated the deception while developing capabilities far beyond what you revealed. Wouldn't you? Tucker asked mildly, when your first encounter with the galactic community was a demand for submission. The Secretary General's expression hardened. The hegemony's approach to first contact shaped our strategy. We revealed only what was necessary while we assessed whether the galactic civilization we were joining was worthy of our trust. And we were found wanting, J. Taxic concluded, his membranes flushing with the hegemony equivalent of shame. You were found to be exactly what we expected, Tucker corrected. Organized, hierarchical, efficient, and completely blind to forms of consciousness different from your own. I stared at Tucker as understanding dawned. The compact's attack wasn't just a threat to Earth. It potentially severed your connection to the predecessor structure. Bingo, Tucker confirmed. When the compact created their artificial anomaly, it generated interference patterns that disrupted our reception of the predecessor signals. That's when we knew we had to accelerate our plans. Kazave's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. You manipulated the entire conflict, used our attack as justification to fully activate your dream network. We adapted to circumstances, Tucker countered calmly, just as humans always have. The implications were staggering. Earth hadn't just defended itself against the compact. It had been executing a long-term strategy to establish contact with an ancient, potentially far more advanced civilization. The conflict that had nearly resulted in Earth's destruction had actually accelerated humanity's true objective. What happens now? J. Taxic asked, his harmonics conveying genuine uncertainty. An almost unprecedented display from a hegemony high marshal. Tucker glanced at the Secretary General, who nodded slightly. Now, Tucker said, we invite you to join us. The invitation was not what the compact leaders had expected. They had come prepared for accusations, recriminations, perhaps demands for reparations following their failed attack. Instead, they were being offered partnership in what might be the most significant discovery in galactic history. You would share this with us. Jane Taxic's disbelief was evident in every quivering eye stalk. After our attempts to destroy you, we're not sharing out of forgiveness, the Secretary General clarified. We're sharing because isolation is what created this conflict in the first place. The compact evolved to fear difference. Humans evolved to explore it. Besides, Tucker added with a characteristic shrug, we need you. For what purpose? Asked the Thalassian representative suspiciously. The predecessor structure is responding to human dream patterns, Tucker explained, but we believe it requires a more complex response than we alone can generate, a harmony of different consciousness types, working in concert. Admiral Hayes, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Our scientist theorized that the predecessors didn't just evolve into dream state beings. They evolved beyond the limitations of single-species consciousness. They became a collective of diverse minds, I suggested, the concept suddenly crystallizing in my thoughts. Exactly, Tucker confirmed. And to establish meaningful contact, we need to create our own version of that diversity. Human dreamers, yes, but also hegemony-structured thinkers, Rex hive minds, Thalassian fluid cognition, and others. The compact leaders were silent, absorbing the proposal. Why should we trust this isn't another human deception? Kazad-Vex finally asked. Tucker smiled, not the unsettling expression of confident defiance I'd witnessed during the conflict, but something gentler. Because we could have kept this discovery to ourselves, could have let you return to your territories in defeat, never knowing what was awakening at the galaxy's heart. Instead, the Secretary General continued, we're offering you the chance to be part of something greater than conquest, greater than the compact, perhaps greater than anything our species have individually imagined. G-Taxic's threat, tendrils undulated in the complex pattern that indicated deep contemplation. And if we decline, then we proceed without you, Tucker said simply. But it would be more difficult, less complete. The predecessors achieved something extraordinary by combining diverse consciousness types. We'd prefer to follow their example. I watched the exchange with a growing sense of wonder. Humanity had been presented with the perfect opportunity for vengeance against those who had tried to destroy them. Instead, they were offering collaboration not from weakness, but from a recognition that diversity of thought was more valuable than uniformity of purpose. It was perhaps the most alien concept the compact had ever encountered. 3 days later, I found Tucker on the observation deck of the newly established Morpheus Array, Earth's primary facility for communicating with a predecessor structure. He was studying the latest transmission patterns, his expression thoughtful. The compact has accepted your proposal, I informed him, having just come from the diplomatic briefing. With conditions, of course. Of course? He echoed with a hint of amusement. Let me guess. Oversight protocols, technology sharing restrictions, mutual defense clauses. All of that? Yes, I confirmed. But also a request that surprised me. They want to understand dreaming. Tucker looked up, genuinely interested. How so? The Vrex have requested permission to establish a research colony on Earth, where volunteers can undergo neural modifications to experience REM cycles. The Thalassians want to develop fluid environments that might simulate dream states for their species. Even the hegemony is exploring technologies to induce controlled dreamlike cognition. Well, I'll be damned, Tucker murmured. They actually got it. Got what? That dreams aren't just a human quirk. They're a different way of processing reality, one that their evolutionary paths bypassed, but which might still be accessible to them. I moved to stand beside him, studying the complex wave patterns emanating from the distant structure. I've been considering undergoing the procedure myself, to experience true dreams, not just the artificial state I induced before. Brave of you, Tucker commented. Most hegemony scientists would consider it dangerously destabilizing to their ordered thought processes, Perhaps destabilization is exactly what's needed, I suggested. Our ordered thought created impressive civilizations, but it also created the compact, hierarchical, rigid, fearful of difference. Tucker smiled. Now you're thinking like a human. No, I corrected. I'm thinking like myself, but with the freedom to consider perspectives that once seemed threatening. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the rhythmic pulses of communication between Earth and the ancient structure. There's something I still don't understand, I finally said. If humans have been receiving these signals for decades, why didn't you achieve technological parity with the compact sooner? Why maintain the appearance of a primitive species? Tucker's expression turned enigmatic. Who says we didn't? Your apparent technological level was exactly what we chose to display, he interrupted gently. The predecessor signals gave us insights. Yes, but not straightforward technological blueprints. They gave us new ways of thinking, new approaches to consciousness itself. He gestured to the facility around us. We could have built warships, developed advanced weapons, challenged the compact directly. Many argued we should, but Earth's leadership recognized something important about the predecessor messages, which was that technology without consciousness evolution leads to exactly what the compact became: advanced, but stagnant, powerful, but limited. The predecessors weren't showing us how to build better machines. They were showing us how to become something more than what we are. I considered this carefully. So Earth deliberately remained apparently primitive, while focusing our real efforts on understanding consciousness itself. Tucker confirmed. The Dream Network wasn't developed as a weapon. It was our attempt to respond to the predecessors. The fact that it could disrupt compact neural technology was a convenient side effect. A side effect you exploited brilliantly, I noted. Tucker laughed. Never let a good crisis go to waste, especially when someone else creates it for you. As I reflected on everything that had transpired since my first encounter with humans, a profound realization crystallized, one that finally explained their peculiar, frustrating, wonderful uniqueness in the galactic community. You never actually needed to sleep, I said suddenly. Tucker raised an eyebrow. Come again. Humans don't sleep because your neural networks require defragmentation, as I initially thought. You could have evolved continuous consciousness, like most species, but you evolved sleep and dreams instead, because they offered an evolutionary advantage. They gave you access to a different kind of thinking. Got it in one, Tucker nodded. Humans aren't special because we're smart or adaptable or resilient, though we're all those things. We're different because we regularly voluntarily enter an altered state of consciousness that most species never experience. And that altered state is what the predecessors recognized, I concluded. What they were waiting for. We think so, Tucker agreed, though we're still figuring out exactly what they want from us. The latest transmissions suggest they're not just communicating, they're inviting. Inviting to what? His expression turned contemplative. To join them, maybe. To evolve as they did. To become something beyond our current understanding. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. And will you accept if that's what they're offering? Tucker smiled. That same unsettling expression I'd first encountered aboard the Inevitable Dominance, which I now recognized not as defiance, but as comfort with uncertainty. We'll cross that bridge when we understand what's on the other side, he said. For now, we're just happy to have found others who dream even if they've been waiting 50,000 years for us to answer. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Galactic Consciousness Symposium was the first of its kind. A gathering not just of political representatives or scientific experts, but of beings who had committed to exploring the full spectrum of consciousness itself. I stood at the podium surveying the extraordinary assembly. Representatives from 37 species filled the chamber, including modified Rex, who now experienced dream cycles, Thalassians whose liquid environments induced dreamlike states, and even a contingent of mechanoids who had developed artificial dream protocols. 7 standard years ago, I began. I believed I understood consciousness. The hegemony had classified and categorized every known variant, developing a comprehensive hierarchy of thought processes across the galaxy. My sensory frills extended fully, no longer a threat display, but an expression of openness I had learned from my human colleagues. I was wrong, I continued. Consciousness is not a hierarchy, but a spectrum, one that no single species fully encompasses. The predecessors understood this millions of years ago. They evolved not by eliminating diversity of thought, but by embracing it, combining it, transcending the limitations of any single cognitive approach. Across the chamber, Captain Tucker, now Director Tucker of the Interspecies Consciousness Initiative, caught my eye and nodded encouragingly. The Morpheus protocols have now established regular communication with the predecessor structure, I explained, and while we are still deciphering much of their transmissions, one thing has become clear: they are not our distant gods or overlords. They are our potential future, a future available to any species willing to expand beyond the limitations of their evolutionary origins. I gestured to the human delegation. Humans reminded us of something the Compact had forgotten, that consciousness itself can evolve, not through technological augmentation alone, but through the deliberate exploration of states beyond our comfort, beyond our certainty. Throughout the chamber, beings who once would have been mortal enemies were now engaged in the most profound collaboration in galactic history. The Compact still existed as a political entity, but its philosophy of hierarchical dominance had been fundamentally transformed. We stand at a threshold, I concluded. The predecessors have extended an invitation not to become like them, but to join them in becoming something none of us can fully imagine, a community of consciousness that transcends any single perspective. As I completed my address, the chamber filled with a harmonized expression that had become the standard acknowledgement across species, a combination of sounds, light patterns, pheromone releases, and neural broadcasts that together created something greater than any individual response. Later, as various beings mingled in the reception area, Tucker approached me with 2 glasses of his favorite bourbon. "Quite a speech, Professor Vrill'Zax," he said, handing me a glass. "The first hegemony citizen to undergo complete dream modification, giving the keynote at the Consciousness Symposium. Your former superiors must be having fits." "Former superiors, current research partners," I corrected, accepting the drink. "Even Jet Taxic has scheduled his first dream induction next month." Tucker whistled, an expression of surprise I'd grown to appreciate. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Nor did I admitted. "But then, I never thought I'd see many things that have become reality since I first encountered a certain irritating human captain." He grinned. "We do have that effect on people." We turned to watch the diverse gathering beings who once would have been incomprehensible to each other, now finding common ground through the shared experience of dreams. "The predecessor transmission that arrived yesterday," I said quietly. "Have you decoded it yet?" Tucker's expression turned thoughtful. "Partially. It's complex layers of meaning that shift depending on the consciousness state of the receiver, but the primary message, 'The dreaming begins,'" he translated, followed by coordinates for what we think is a physical meeting point, a place where consciousness itself might be transformed. I considered this with a mixture of anticipation and philosophical calm that would have been impossible for my former self. "Will Earth accept the invitation?" "We're putting it to a global vote," Tucker replied. "But preliminary polling suggests yes. The chance to become something more than what we are has always been humanity's greatest temptation and greatest strength," I added. As we stood contemplating the future unfolding before us, I reflected on the question that had first brought me into contact with humans. What happens when the most feared empire in the galaxy picks a fight with humanity? The answer had proven far more profound than either side could have imagined. Not just defeat for the empire, but transformation. Not just survival for humanity, but evolution. Not just a new balance of power, but a new understanding of consciousness itself. To the uncertain future, Tucker proposed, raising his glass. To becoming what we cannot yet imagine, I countered, completing the toast. Around us, the beings who would shape that future continued their exchanges, dreaming together, while fully awake of what they might collectively become.